Segment 3, Gold and Black Live with Cory Palm, a man that not everybody sees, but they should know because he does about everything over in athletics, especially when it comes to electronic communication, video, writing books, etc. Cory, welcome to Gold and Black Live. We appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, you know, the reason why, among other things, we could talk to you about a lot of subjects, but the subject of the day is the book that you're working on the 100 years of Ross-Ade Stadium, a book that's going to come out, I think you said next spring, 2024, which will be the actual 100th year since the facility opened, on November 22nd, 1924. Talk about that. I mean, you wrote a great book on the 1943 team and the great history of the undefeated Purdue team in 1943. But talk about what got you excited about this story and how this all came to pass.
Absolutely. So a couple of years ago, we were celebrating the 500th game in Ross-Ade Stadium, and the subject came up. Hey, we should do a countdown of games and top 10 games of the 500 or something like that. So I helped come up with a list for that, and that was sort of the impetus for starting to think in those terms. And I was talking with a former colleague, Matt Rector, who was the sports information director at the time, and we were kicking around some ideas. And I said, 100 years is right around the corner. It'd be fun to expand this and take it beyond the realm of video, because we sort of limited the top 10 games initially to games we have film of. So, that just excludes half of a century, basically.
Yeah.
And so started thinking in those terms and started looking back and, well, what games would be included? And this could be a lot of fun. I came up with an idea. It was right on the heels of the Perfect Warriors book. So I was kind of still in that, writing mindset, and I pitched it to a few publishers and got one who was very interested. And so sort of plowed ahead from there.
We'll talk about that. Will it be and I know there are photos, and you work in a place where there are photos as well, but talk about what is it going to be? Somewhat not photo driven, but a lot of text with it. What's the plan for the book in terms of?
Yeah. So the approach we landed on was I would write 300 to 500 word recaps on 100 different games, and just sort of tell the story of the season or the story of that game, why it was important. Did it come down to the wire? Was there a deep underlying storyline to it? And then, the publisher I was working with, the books that they do, it's the History Press through Arcadia Publishing. They do a lot of photo-driven books. So they're like, okay, we need photo assets. So I got approval from Purdue Athletics to use the archives pretty extensively. And it's going to have upwards of 60 photos in it.
Oh, great.
From throughout the years, shots of the stadium and then shots from some of the iconic games. We've got a great color shot of Greasy against Notre Dame in 1965, things like that. So it's kind of a mix, but that gives you a general sense for what the layout of the book's going to be.
Well, and this story about David Ross and George Ade and what all that came to be, and where college athletics was in 1924 versus 2023 and 2024. Very interesting differences, and some of the same questions were going on at the time, about, well, do we want to emphasize athletics? How do we deal with the commercialization of athletics? But it tied in to, you needed David Ross and a George Ade to step up and get some other folks to get this facility going. And you had a university president early on that wasn't all that gung-ho about it.
Yep.
Changed after a hiking accident, and then Edward Elliott comes in and a little more amenable to it. Really a ton of storylines as you look at this, not just games, but the story of this facility being built.
There are, and the story of the stadium, like you said, is fascinating. It's not something that I delve into much. I kept my focus very much on the games, and there's a preface to there's an opening to the book where I lay that out. Hey, if you want to learn the history of Ross-Ade Stadium, here's some avenues to do that, but that's not this. I also make it clear that this is not a rank order of 100 games, because
good idea.
very personal list for everybody, and an exercise in futility, I think.
When you go back to the early games, and I assume in 1929, a season that saw Purdue go 9-0 and win its only undisputed, is it 9-0 or 8-0, but the only undisputed Big Ten championship in its history.
Yep.
But what are some of your earliest games that you focus on?
1931 was fascinating. We opened the season with a doubleheader.
Yeah.
Against I believe it was College and
Case Western, right?
Yeah, Case Western, right? Case Reserve. So that was interesting, reading about how that got divvied up. One really cool thing, Alan, and I kind of stumbled across a few things. You learn the history of Purdue football in such a full way when you do something like this.
Yes.
I knew about the training camp accident, in the mid 30s, and that a couple players had died when a fire broke out in the showers. It's a story, I think you've written about it. I know I've read it in some of your work. It's as I was working my way through the 30s, there was a game the previous year where the hero of the game was a player that actually was one of the ones that perished the next fall. So, readers will get a sense of how important these people are and sort of what happened to them. It adds more context, I think. Those were some stories that stood out from the 30s. The 40s. The 40s were an up and down time. We had a couple. We had that 43 season, but everything else was kind of bleak. We get into the 50s, and one thing that I thought was fascinating. I'm going through and paring down, and okay, Jack Malikoff, pretty big deal. Yeah. Probably go ahead and include his first game at Purdue, his first win. And so when I went through and started researching that in 1956, I found that was also the first game that Purdue Pete debuted at a Purdue football game. So, two stalwarts of Purdue athletics, two very important figures in Purdue Boilermaker history, debuted on the field the same time there. That was an interesting sort of hook in 56. So just, sort of filling out the fuller picture has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, you look at that and you say that there's so much, as you know, as much as anybody, that goes into a college football game. It's all about the experience. And that stadium, there were some magical games in terms of wins and some disappointments. Certainly, you're going to lose games when you play 100 years of football.
Yeah,
it is also about those unbelievable experiences in terms of any. We saw last week at Virginia Tech, the longest game in Purdue history, and I don't think I've ever seen a game delayed 5.5, 6 hours or whatever it was. Anything from those? Any games that you focused on that were some crazy weather games or cold temperatures or anything of that that come to the top?
Yeah, some games that there's been a lot of rain games. There have been a lot of cold games. One game that I thought was really fascinating was the Old Oaken Bucket game at 52.
Yeah.
Some of the games, once I started getting into the more modern era, I found that our archives did have some video. Yeah. So as I was researching, I would go back and watch as well, so that would help me do the research. In the 52 game, Indiana came out in their road crimson jerseys, and they were so mud covered that they changed at halftime and came back out. I take that back. They were in their road white jerseys. When they came back in halftime, they were in their home crimson jerseys. Yeah. So Purdue was wearing black that were mud covered, and Indiana was wearing red that were, clean. And I'd never seen that before. I thought that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and you have a black jersey and a red jersey and a crimson jersey. Might have been hard for Dale Samuels to Dale, we could still ask Dale that question, what that was like, a monumental game, because that got Purdue a share of the Big Ten championship in a fourth quarter. I think it was a fourth quarter touchdown pass by Samuels that beat them 21-16, if memory serves. But what again, iconic Big Ten championships. While Purdue has had a good tradition, championships are always a something that doesn't come easily. Certainly Purdue Notre Dame in the 60s, You think about Purdue winning in 65, 67, and 69 at home against the Fighting Irish. I think they might have won in 63 as well. But my point is, some of those iconic games, I assume some of those are featured as well.
They are 65 when Greasy played about a perfect game to beat the Irish. And then Phipps, Phipps going 3-0 against the Irish, the only quarterback at the time to have done so. Might still be the only starting quarterback to have done that. I didn't do any research beyond 69 to fill out that, but yeah, that one's certainly, there's a lot of great Notre Dame tales in there, whether it's those spinning forward to 79 and then Tiller 97 and anytime you beat the Irish, it's a big deal.
Yeah, it was, and it certainly was a factor. There is someone that it did actually. I can't remember now. I'm trying to think. Was it Matt Leinart? I'm not sure, but there is somebody that has won at least. But you're right. It's a standard. He only had 3 chances because he didn't play as a freshman, and one as a sophomore, junior, and senior. Got on the cover of Sports Illustrated in a game in Ross-Age Stadium. I think that might be about the only time that's happened as well. Yeah. You look back at some of those unbelievable games. You talk about the 97 Notre Dame game, the 2018 Ohio State game, and certainly games that you were around to see in your time in West Lafayette. There are those, just the way the crowd reacted to those fans rushing the field, the opportunity to have that type of experience certainly augments what makes a stadium special and what makes winning and losing in that stadium special.
Definitely, yeah. Like you said, looking back at some of the games from the early 80s, late 70s, where the capacity was, in the high 60s, 69, 70,000 people. And, from year to year, a record crowd. And then, the largest crowd to ever watch a football game in the state of Indiana. And it's always been so much about the fans, and their celebrations are fantastic. Seeing the rolls of toilet paper flying in the end zone back when that was a thing. And of course, the field storming, how quickly that all happens is a lot of fun. And I've gotten a chance to talk to a few players we're doing a companion series, Tim Newton and I, this fall, Ross-Age's Greatest Games podcast.
Airs on Thursdays or posted on Thursdays, right?
That's right. We just released the one with Keena Turner today. So we talk about 79 Michigan with Keena.
Right.
And it's fantastic. I encourage everybody to go check it out. We were talking with, I think it was Ryan Kerrigan about the 09 Ohio State game, which is a spoiler alert, that's coming. And he said, one of the things I always wanted to do as a kid was play in a game where the field got stormed.
Yeah. And
it took until that point in his career, and it never happened again while he was here. I don't believe it happens that much. It doesn't happen in the NFL. So he was just so proud to have been able to be a part of that. Even the players recognize how big of a deal it is for the fans.
Yeah, Purdue 1-5 at the time, comes up and beats Ohio State. Danny Hope's first year, unbelievable win. And yes, they stormed the field. Another guy that was a part of a field storming in Ross-Age Stadium will be here this weekend, Tim Stratton. We've seen the picture of him on the goalpost after the Michigan game in 2000. I think it was after the Michigan game when he was on there. They stormed the field in the 2000 season. I think after Michigan, after Ohio State, and of course they were on the field for the Indiana game. One of the great moments in a very cold day, but a magical moment for Purdue fans. Longer time Purdue fans will never forget is that Rose Bowl clinching win against Indiana. I'm sure that all those games are featured in some fashion in that, going to be featured in that book.
No doubt. All 3 of those games are definitely in, and let me tell you, the more modern we got, Alan, the harder it was for me to stay within that 300 to 500 word limit that I created for myself. True. Those are some of the longer ones for sure.
Yeah. When you look at tomorrow night's game, and of course, really going to be special. It was special with Fresno State just because of the new configuration, but the stadium is taking on a personality it's never had. It's now a full bowl, so to speak. And you have to think, is there any room to add any in the last minute? Or are you at 100 already?
Well, I tell you what, I always went in planning on including the Fresno State game because at the beginning of the Walters era and the drastic change to the stadium. So that was always a part of the plan. We were all hoping for a win. Of course, I was hoping for one for a little bit different reason than everybody else. But, in the end, college football is not just about wins and losses. And the story of that game is so important to the history of Purdue football because of the stadium renovation, because of what we hope is the beginning of a great Ryan Walters era. So that game still gets included. I've got one chance with my publisher to go back in and add something. If something very special happens, I'll have to figure out what game to drop because it's 100 greatest games. And I kind of fudged a little bit. That doubleheader I mentioned earlier counts as one game because it's one day. But we'll figure out what game to drop. And, if Syracuse comes down to a last second touchdown where the Boilermakers pull it out, maybe that one gets slid in there a little bit.
Or you get another storming of the field. Ben Freehill hits a 64-yard field goal with 1 second to go. Who knows? We can create any scenario we want. So it is true that Purdue is not 100-0 in the games that you picked. Correct? Okay, that's good. I give you credit.
That is correct.
Because sometimes it's easier. You always want to. Oh, these are all the positive moments. There are great stories in that stadium, even in difficulty or losses. And then we put the word difficulty in context here, certainly. But really looking forward to the working title of the book.
The title is going to be Ross-Ade Stadium 100 Greatest Games.
All right. Well, we can't wait to see that, Cory. We appreciate all you do. Like I said, you bring Purdue athletics to life in so many ways with your work with all the other sports, volleyball, your podcast. Dig City is a must listen each week if you want to keep up with Purdue's nationally ranked. And you're going to be running off to got a weekend of volleyball here this weekend as well. So that will be but thanks so much for your time. We always enjoy talking, and you've been a guest on our show. You always have something interesting to say, and we appreciate that so much.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate all the support.
Yeah, sounds good. And we want to thank Triple X on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com. Also, Gordon Jackson and the folks at WLFI for making this happen. We have a lot of fun doing this on Friday afternoons. Hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you next week. We'll be doing a game day version next week. I know that it all fries all. I mean, that short week is great for the fans, maybe not always so great for everybody else. But Purdue will be playing Wisconsin next Friday, and we'll be doing a game day version of that as the Boilermakers take on the Badgers on Friday night, the 22nd in Ross-Ade Stadium. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week on Gold and Black Live.